Jim Williams with you on the New Mexico Suncast, and I'm joined by Representative Dr. Elaine Cortez. She's with District 62, southeast corner of New Mexico. Tell us about your home and where you are.
Well, first, I think that you should know my roots. If we're going to get started, we should get started there. So I was the kid whose dreams were so much bigger than my family's income. And just to describe the neighborhood that I grew up in, I had a prostitute who lived across the street and conducted her business out by the hour. And if that wasn't bad enough, we had gang members on the opposite side. So there were shootings and police in my neighborhood. And if that wasn't bad enough, we had drunks in the backyard who would fight their roosters and pit bulls. And that's what I grew up looking out my bedroom window. And my mom, like my late mom, and my dad would always say, Elaine, you're going to leave your mark on this world. And you're going to go to college, even though we can't afford to pay your way. And I remember having that conversation with him when I was in the first grade and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to figure my life out. And so I believe that my life is a product of choices. You get to choose the life you want by the choices that you make. And I knew that I would make it out of the hood. And so I knew that at an early age, it was up to me. And so I worked 4 jobs to put myself through my bachelor's degree. And, you know, I'd leave one job and go to the next and then get all of my paychecks and go and pay for my tuition. And I was able to graduate with my undergrad debt free. And then I wanted to continue pursuing my education and got a master's, and then didn't stop there and got a doctorate and became a doctor and an expert in my field. And so, you know, I was able to accomplish those things, not because I grew up with a silver spoon in my mouth or took any type of government assistance. My family always believed in hard work, and if you want it, you better go out and get it. So that's exactly what I did. And I think that that's a testament about, and I don't think about what other New Mexicans can do. And I don't think that makes me special particularly. It's just an example of hard work and a lifestyle of choices.
Could I call you Elaine?
Please.
Okay. Elaine, I'm thinking as you're talking, though, that your whole intention this whole time and why you're serving in the New Mexico legislature is you wanted to take people with you.
Absolutely. And so, you know, people go, oh, you're in politics, that you're very ambitious. And I want to separate those things in this conversation. You know, becoming a doctor in my field and making it out of the ghetto, that was ambitious. I wanted a different life. I knew that just because I grew up rough, I didn't have to answer rough. But when it comes to politics, it's like a different side of my heart. And I felt called by God to do this. Whenever I was 26 years old, I took my late mom out at the time to eat. And I said, I believe God's called me to politics. I'm going to be in office. And I don't know how, and I don't know when, but I'm going to be in office one day. And so she was like, I believe it. You're going to touch thousands of people. And well, nothing grand happened after that. I was 26 years old, and now I'm 42, the first time in office. But I believe that it was a calling of God. And in 2022, I ran for office and lost by a little bit, up against the oil and gas guy. But I felt called to politics, and they would say, why are you running against him? What did he do wrong? And I said, he did nothing wrong. I'm following a call that I believe God has placed on my life. And so he's Senator Larry Scott. He's actually a dear friend of mine now and my mentor for oil and gas. But even after I lost, I went through some big losses in my life. And the first one was my mom passed away from cancer. I had a miscarriage whenever I ran my first campaign. So I lost a mom, I lost a baby, and then I lost a big public election. And so again, my life is marked by a life of choices. And so even though I experienced loss and grief and tragedy, I knew that God had placed this call in my life. And so I ran again and actually won by 49 votes.
Where do you live now, Elaine?
In Hobbs, New Mexico.
So I want to know, if we are traveling to Hobbs, where's the best place to go get breakfast?
I'm going to say El Palomar. It's one of my favorite places, and you can get the best huevos rancheros there, and they're red and their green is really good.
Have you tasted food in any other state better than New Mexico?
No, I'm going to say New Mexico's at the top. And I've traveled all over the world, working in AIDS hospices and orphanages and sharing my faith and doing humanitarian aid in Central America, South America, South Africa, and Botswana. And I'm going to say New Mexico is the best.
We appreciate, which is one of the reasons we're doing this, we appreciate your service because this is not easy, is it?
No. And, a lot of people have said, man, are you worn out? And, we're halfway through the session. And then after just sharing the things that I shared with you about loss and tragedy and grief, I also grew up with a military dad and two older brothers, and people hear me and having really heated debates, and they're like, are you okay? And I'm like, in my household, that's a Tuesday. So I feel like I was made for this, and I've got thick skin that just kind of comes with the territory of having two older brothers and a military dad. Something that my family has always said is, my father's a pastor, which is, religion is the topic. And then people say you shouldn't talk about religion or politics because those things are really, it's just not kosher to talk about those things at the dinner table. And I thought, if we followed those rules, we'd have nothing to talk about. So.
And I know you believe we should talk about both.
Absolutely. You got to have the hard conversations to make your biggest impact.
I love that. Talking about the hard conversations, how's the legislative session gone for you today? I know there's bills that you're really focused on and interested in. So give us a recap of where we are today and what you're expecting for the next 3 weeks.
Well, not everything has obviously gone in my favor here. And again, people say, isn't that hard? And I say, well, you know what? Even when I lose, I'm winning because I've worked hard to have a seat at the table and to have a voice and to represent my constituents in District 62. And something that we also say in Spanish is vale la pena, that it's worth the trouble. And so some of the bills that I've carried that have gotten tabled are the elimination of the personal income tax. And that was a tough conversation. We had about a 2-hour debate, but it's worth it because we know inflation is a federal issue and costs are just continually rising, and people in my district are hurting financially. And the case that I made is people need a life preserver. They need help now because they're hurting. And so that was one way of doing it. And with this surplus that we have, thanks to oil and gas, I come from oil country, oil and gas funded 49% of the budget last year. We have the money. Now it's just needs to be decided on where that money is going. And I don't know if you saw the budget that got passed in the House, $3.5 million went to the conservation of the beavers. And so, if we're giving $3.5 million to beavers, I think that we could cut the personal income tax and give money back to New Mexicans. Another bill that I carried was the elimination of Social Security tax. And actually that conversation, we actually had a couple of Democrats that were willing to admit this is worth the conversation. And so, we've done it for the lower income, but people are not just making bank off of Social Security. And most people were already taxed. A worker was taxed in their working years. So essentially, this is a double tax.
When you talk about your constituents, does it help you if your constituents and others throughout the state contact their legislators and tell them what they think?
Absolutely. And my constituents do. I make my cell phone available and I say, call, email, or text me. And a lot of them will text me. And whenever I'm debating a bill or presenting a bill that's important to them, my phone is constantly blowing up. I have, on average, about 100 text messages unread at some point during the day. And I'm doing my best to answer them. Even when I was chatting on my way up here, I'm answering text messages from constituents. So absolutely, yes, that's the only way that I can be their voice, is that if I know how they feel about certain issues. And that's why I presented the bills that I did, because I have been talking with constituents. And during my campaign, I spent hours door knocking and went to thousands of houses asking people what matters to you.
What matters to you? Obviously that's a reflection of your constituents. What's really got to get done in the next 3 weeks and going to be your major focus?
Well, I can tell you the lens that I look at everything is through my faith, through the Word of God. the Bible, and then my conservative values. And my conservative values are pro-life, it's fiscally conservative, it's less government, it's giving people the autonomy to choose, it's putting money back in the pockets of New Mexicans. And that's the lens that I look through. And it's ironic that I'm in government because I'm always saying we should have less government and give the power back to the people. That's where it really belongs.
How do you feel about, is it safe? This is not a comment about Hobbs. It's really a comment about New Mexico. Is New Mexico safe? Is it a safe place to live?
Well, it's a safe haven for criminals. Let me tell you that. Based on the lack of accountability in our law, it attracts criminals. And I think the first step to really addressing that issue is holding criminals accountable.
Do you feel good about the bills that were announced today by Governor Grisham as
You
her
mean
signing?
the crime package?
That's what it's titled.
I think it's a start. I think that we could do a whole lot more for our people. And one of my bills that still hasn't gotten heard because the chair has decided that I don't have the votes and it's not worth listening to. And I'm carrying another bill, and it is demanding life in prison for fentanyl traffickers. And actually, it's politically unpopular in New Mexico to hold criminals accountable. And in my perspective, if you're trafficking fentanyl, you're getting people hooked on it, and then people are overdosing here in New Mexico, you are essentially taking a life, and you should be responsible for taking such a life.
But it's not really being considered?
No, sir. So the chair has told me I don't have the votes. And I thought, well, I've had the conversation repetitively for 2 weeks now, it is part of the democratic process. And if they have a friendly amendment to propose, then propose it. But let me present my bill. And if I don't have the votes, then what's the harm in me presenting my bill?
Let me ask you about the support you feel we give to law enforcement. Do you think we have the laws available in our state to actually support our first responders and law enforcement officers?
No. Qualified immunity was removed years ago, and so people can bankrupt municipalities and sue law enforcement for acting in their role. So no, you have law enforcement, they go out, they risk their lives for complete strangers. They run towards danger while the rest of us are running away from danger. And yet we make it so easy for them to be sued. And that's not okay. So if a police officer is putting their life in danger, the least that we can do as legislators is protect them by our laws. And we've got a long way to go to do that.
It's my understanding that the removing qualified immunity was done so that police officers themselves would be financially responsible for things they did wrong. And that actually doesn't make any sense to me. I'm a retired banker. And if you sue me as a police officer, I don't have the money that a municipality has. So it doesn't actually even make any financial sense.
No, it doesn't, and it can bankrupt municipalities.
And it's harming the ability of Hobbs and Albuquerque and Las Cruces and other cities to recruit officers.
Oh, absolutely. They're going to other places, and I'm a border town. I'm 20 minutes from Texas, and we are losing officers to Texas because they protect their law enforcement there. And so if we're going to present a crime package, let's protect our law enforcement. Let's hold criminals accountable. Those are the very basic steps in presenting a crime package.
And you feel like the legislature, even in the next 3 weeks, could take some action in these areas and solve the problem.
Well, they sure need to.
We appreciate.
And when I say they, you know who I'm referring to, because the Republicans are willing, we're ready, and we have bills that are waiting to be heard.
Do you work well with, I know you offer your services to everybody in terms of, hey, I want to work with you, I want to work with this person. But there are people in the legislature that are not willing to cooperate. And is that hard? I teased you earlier. I said, before we started the interview, I said, do you have PTSD after this many weeks in the legislature?
Not growing up with two older brothers in the military, Dad, is going to take a whole lot more than this. But, you know, I'm accustomed to having controversy and disagreeing. That's, like I said, it's a Tuesday in the household that I grew up in. But, you know, we'll have heated debates sometimes in some of our committee meetings. And afterwards, I'm like, hey, girl, or hey, what are you doing for dinner? And hey, are you going to go to that dinner? And that's to the other side. And people are like, how can you be so lighthearted? And do you know who you're talking to? And I'm like, I know exactly who I'm talking to. But that's how we're going to get good legislation passed, is by working with the other side. And so I'm ready to work with the other side, but I have a problem if you won't hear my bill.
Yeah.
That's just part of the democratic process, is, you know, and I don't know what the other side is so afraid of. If you have the majority, then if you can pass the bills that you want, why is it so scary to hear what I have to say about holding criminals accountable?
Dr. Elaine Cortez, District 62, thank you for your time today. And I hope you'll use the New Mexico Sun and the New Mexico Suncast as a tool, because anytime you have a message, when you want to communicate people to the citizens, we want to be there to help you communicate.
Thank you so much. It was an honor.
Thank you.